What if the moment you walked away from someone who truly loved you became the moment you lost a kind of love that life rarely offers twice? That question alone can shake the heart, because deep down everyone knows how rare it is to meet someone who chooses you with full sincerity, patience and loyalty. A good man doesn't love halfway. He doesn't give fragments of himself. He gives completely, and when that kind of love is broken, something inside you begins to understand the cost long after the damage is done. You start to feel the weight of what you had, not because you suddenly miss the attention or the comfort or the presence, but because you begin to see the difference between ordinary affection and the kind of love that comes from a man who treats your heart like something worth protecting. You begin to realize how rare it is to be loved without conditions, without games, without fear. And that realization is where the fear begins, because the world does not give many chances to feel that kind of safety again. The mind starts replaying moments you once overlooked, the small acts of care, the quiet understanding, the way he listened when no one else did, the way he tried even when he was tired, the way he stayed patient even when things were difficult. At the time, these things felt normal. Now they feel like a blessing you didn't recognize. And when that truth hits, it becomes impossible to ignore the fear that you didn't just lose someone, you lost someone good. What makes this fear so powerful is that it grows silently. It arrives in moments when you see someone else being treated with indifference and suddenly remember how differently he treated you. It surfaces when you meet new people and notice how fast they judge, how quickly they give up, how easily they walk away. That's when the realization cuts deepest. Kindness is not common. Patience is not common. Loyalty is not common. A good man is not common. And this truth brings you to one of the hardest emotional questions a person can face. What if the love you threw away was the best love you will ever be offered? This question doesn't come to punish you. It comes to wake you up. It comes to help you understand the gravity of losing someone who gave you more than most people are capable of giving. It comes to remind you that real love, steady love, honest love, healing love does not show up at every corner. But here's the emotional reward, the reason you should stay until the very end of this message. This understanding is not meant to break you. It's meant to shape you. It's meant to build awareness, maturity, and wisdom so you never repeat the same mistake again, whether with him or with someone else who deserves the best version of you. Because when you understand the value of a good man, you also learn the value of giving love with more intention, more presence, and more gratitude. Stay with this message until the end, because what you'll discover next is not just what women fear after hurting a good man, but how those fears can become the catalyst for transformation, healing, and becoming someone who never loses a love like that again. There comes a moment when the weight of broken trust hits harder than the loss itself, because trust is the foundation that makes love feel safe, and once it's cracked, the entire emotional world changes. You start to realize that hurting a good man doesn't just distance him, it transforms him. It reshapes the way he looks at you, the way he listens to you, the way he opens his heart to you. And this shift is where the fear quietly settles in, because you can feel that something he once gave freely is now guarded, protected, and held back in ways you never imagined. You sense it in his silence, in the shorter replies, in the emotional pauses that didn't exist before. It's not anger. It's not revenge, it's the slow rebuilding of his own boundaries, the boundaries he never needed with you until you showed him that even the safest person can become a source of pain. That realization is heavy, because there is nothing more heartbreaking than watching someone who once trusted you with their entire heart become someone who now measures every word, every action, every step. And deep inside, a frightening question begins to echo. What if the version of him who trusted you unconditionally is gone forever? That question shakes you because you remember how open he used to be, how honest he used to be, how he shared his fears, his dreams, his weaknesses without hesitation. You remember how emotionally safe he felt in your presence. And now that openness has turned into caution, that vulnerability has turned into distance, that trust has turned into quiet walls you never expected to face. This shift forces a new kind of awareness, an uncomfortable, emotional awareness that you may have changed something inside him permanently, not because he wants to punish you, but because pain teaches lessons that love alone never could. A good man doesn't harden out of spite, he hardens out of survival. And once he learns that giving everything can lead to being broken, he becomes careful with the pieces that remain. You start to feel the fear that trust, once lost, may never return in the same form. Apologies can't restore innocence. Promises can't erase memory. Even your own growth can't guarantee that his heart will ever risk that level of openness again. And that fear stays with you because you know how rare it was for him to trust so deeply in the first place. But within this fear lies a powerful awakening, one that calls you to rise higher, to become more intentional, more present, more aware of the emotional consequences of your actions. It's an invitation to grow beyond the patterns that caused the damage. It's a push to become the kind of person who inspires trust rather than takes it for granted. Because a good man may distance himself when he's hurt, but he also pays attention to effort, consistency, and change. This is where your strength begins to form, not in trying to force his trust back, but in becoming someone worthy of it, not in chasing his old openness, but in earning the new version, slowly, patiently, sincerely, because trust rebuilt is stronger than trust assumed. And if you allow this moment to shape you instead of shame you, you'll discover that the pain of losing trust can become the beginning of reclaiming not just his respect, but your own. There is a moment when the mind begins to imagine what it once dismissed, and that imagination becomes a source of fear that grows stronger with every passing day. It's the fear of someone else stepping into the space you once believed was yours. The fear of another woman receiving the tenderness, the loyalty, the devotion that you once overlooked or underestimated. And this fear doesn't come from jealousy alone. It comes from clarity. The clarity of realizing how deeply a good man can love and how profoundly that love can elevate someone's life. You begin to understand that the qualities you once took for granted are qualities another woman would treasure. His patience becomes someone else's comfort. His consistency becomes someone else's stability. His affection becomes someone else's healing. The moments he once reserved for you could become the moments another woman looks forward to every single day. And this thought settles like a quiet storm, because you now see how easily a heart like his can become a blessing in the right hands. The fear intensifies when you recognize that pain has changed him, not into a colder man, but into a wiser one, a man who no longer gives blindly, a man who no longer pours endlessly into empty hands, a man who now understands the value of his time, his energy, and his loyalty. This version of him, stronger, clearer, more self-aware, is even more desirable. And the world notices, people notice. The kind of woman who values depth notices. And that realization shakes you because you know you contributed to the transformation you now fear losing to someone else. You start imagining the connection he could build with someone who sees him fully, someone who listens without dismissing, someone who chooses him without hesitation, someone who respects what you may not have protected. And as painful as this is, it forces you to confront a truth you tried to ignore. Someone else might love him in the way he always deserved. This fear can feel like a tightening in the chest, because losing him is one thing. Watching him become happier with someone who treats him better is something entirely different. Not because you want to control his life, but because you finally understand his worth. You see the sacrifices he made. You see the gentleness he gave. You see the loyalty he offered without question. And now you understand how precious those qualities are. But here is where this fear has the power to transform you. It pushes you to confront what you allowed yourself to overlook. It challenges you to rise into maturity, emotional depth, and accountability. It calls you to grow into someone who doesn't lose good people because of temporary blindness or unchecked habits. The fear of replacement is not truly about another woman. It's about becoming aware of the gap between who you were and who you are capable of becoming. And if you let that awareness guide you instead of break you, you'll discover that fear can evolve into strength, into intention, into the determination to never again take for granted what most people spend their entire lives searching for. Because the fear of being replaced doesn't have to destroy you. It can refine you. It can sharpen your heart. It can push you to become the kind of person who deserves the kind of love you almost lost forever. There comes a point when the fear of another woman isn't the only fear that lingers. A deeper one begins to rise, one that strikes at the core of who you are becoming. It's the fear of facing yourself, not the surface version you show the world, but the real version, the one you meet in silence when no one is watching, when every distraction fades and all that remains is the truth you've been avoiding. This fear is powerful because it doesn't come from losing a man. It comes from realizing the kind of person you allowed yourself to be while you had him. You begin to replay moments not to punish yourself, but because your conscience demands honesty. The things you brushed off, the times you dismissed his feelings, the moments you responded with impatience instead of understanding. You start to recognize the patterns that hurt him, not because he was weak, but because he was invested. That realization carries a weight that is hard to escape. It forces you to see how a good man can absorb pain while still trying to protect your heart, and how easy it is to mistake that strength for indestructibility. The most painful part of this reflection is understanding that he didn't break because he was fragile. He broke because he trusted you. And when you hurt someone who trusted you deeply, the guilt doesn't disappear just because time passes. It follows you into conversations, into new connections, into quiet nights when the world slows down and your mind speeds up. You feel the gap between the person you wanted to be and the person you were in those moments, and that gap becomes impossible to ignore. This fear intensifies when you see yourself repeating old habits or reacting from old wounds. It becomes clear that the pain you caused didn't come from cruelty. It came from unhealed parts of yourself. And now, without the comfort of a good man's patience softening your flaws, you're forced to confront them directly. That confrontation is uncomfortable. It's humbling. It's heavy. But it's necessary. You begin to recognize how often he gave you grace you didn't even notice, how often he chose understanding instead of judgment, how often he chose calm over chaos. You see now that what you thought was normal was actually extraordinary. And the guilt that rises from that clarity isn't meant to destroy you, it's meant to awaken you, because guilt is not the enemy. Staying the same is this fear pushes you to question who you want to be moving forward. Do you continue patterns that hurt the people who love you, or do you finally break them? Do you hide behind excuses? Or do you take responsibility for the emotional impact of your actions? These questions are uncomfortable, but they're the very questions that lead to transformation, the kind of transformation that turns regret into wisdom, the kind that turns awareness into growth, the kind that ensures you never lose someone good because you weren't willing to face yourself. In this moment, the fear becomes a mirror, not to shame you, but to show you the path toward becoming someone stronger, more grounded, more emotionally awake, someone capable of giving the love you always wanted to receive, someone who can protect what matters instead of realizing its value only after it's gone. And once you allow yourself to face this truth fully, you open the door to a version of yourself that no longer fears reflection, because growth has replaced regret. There comes a moment when the fear of facing yourself evolves into something even more unsettling, the fear of realizing that while you're busy questioning him, doubting him, or underestimating him, he was slowly discovering his own worth. And once a good man truly understands his value, everything changes. The dynamic shifts. The power returns to his hands. The version of him who once tolerated pain, overlooked flaws, and carried emotional weight that wasn't his to carry begins to fade. In his place stands a man who finally knows what he deserves, and that realization creates a fear that cuts deeper than heartbreak. You start to notice the subtle signs of his transformation, not because he tries to prove anything, but because he no longer needs to. His voice becomes steadier, his boundaries become firmer, his presence becomes stronger. He is no longer seeking approval, he is no longer apologizing for his needs. He is no longer dimming himself to keep the peace. That shift is powerful because it shows you something you didn't expect. He is healing, not for you, but for himself. This awareness hits hard because you remember the version of him who would drop everything just to make you feel understood. The man who went out of his way to make things right even when the mistakes weren't his. The man who believed that loving someone meant carrying their emotional burdens alongside his own. And now, watching him grow into someone who refuses to shrink for anyone, you realize how much strength he always had, but how much of that strength he used to pour into you. The fear grows when you see him becoming more selective with his time, more intentional with his energy, more careful with his heart. Because you know that once a good man learns to protect himself, he stops giving chances the way he once did. He stops excusing behavior that drains him. He stops accepting love that feels inconsistent or conditional. He starts valuing himself the way he once valued you, and that shift means he may never allow himself to be treated the same way again. Deep down, you know this transformation isn't temporary. It's not a phase. It's a permanent evolution born from pain, reflection, and resilience. And this realization forces you to confront a truth you can't ignore. You didn't lose a man who was weak. You lost a man who simply hadn't realized his power yet. As his confidence rises, a new question begins to echo inside you. What if the strongest, most grounded version of him is the one who finally decides to walk away for good? Not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of wisdom. Because once a man understands his worth, he stops fighting for places where he feels misunderstood. He stops begging for clarity. He stops compromising who he is just to keep someone close. And That fear, the fear of losing the evolved version of him, becomes a powerful mirror reflecting every part of you that needs to grow. But this fear also carries a gift if you're willing to receive it. It pushes you to rise into your own worth, to heal the parts of you that made you harm what was good, to become someone who doesn't take love for granted, someone who doesn't confuse softness with weakness, someone who recognizes the profound strength it takes to love without losing yourself. Because once a good man learns his worth, the question is no longer whether he'll come back. The question becomes whether you'll be ready if he does, or strong enough to honor the love you once underestimated. There comes a point when the fear stops being about him moving on, or about someone else appreciating him more, and shifts into a deeper, heavier realization, the fear that the damage you caused may have changed the way he sees love itself. Not just love with you, but love as a whole. Because when a good man gets hurt, he doesn't just pull away from the person who hurt him. He pulls away from the version of himself who loved without caution. And that shift can feel devastating because you begin to understand that the pain didn't just push him away from you, it pushed him away from the way he used to love. You start to see how he no longer expresses himself with the same freedom, how he no longer speaks with the same softness, how he no longer opens up with the same vulnerability. It's not bitterness, it's protection. He learned that giving his whole heart without boundaries cost him a part of himself, and now he guards that part like something fragile. And that is where the fear quietly settles. The fear that you were the turning point that made him close off, the moment that taught him caution where he once offered trust. This realization weighs heavily because you remember the version of him who believed in sincere love, who believed that people meant what they said, who believed loyalty was still real. And now you see the hesitancy in his eyes, the pause before he believes, the distance he keeps even when he cares. You can feel that he's changed, not because he wants to punish anyone, but because he refuses to lose himself again. And deep inside, you fear that you were the lesson that shaped this new emotional armor. The fear grows stronger when you see how this change affects his life, how he focuses more on his goals, how he invests more in himself, how he chooses peace over chaos, solitude over confusion, clarity over emotional guessing games. You watch him elevate in ways you once wished he would, but now you're not sure you will ever be close enough to witness the full transformation. It feels like losing him twice, once to the pain and once to the growth, and the most painful part is knowing that his distance isn't a phase. It's a boundary built from understanding that giving too much to the wrong person can cost you years of your life. And even if he forgives you, even if he finds a place for you in his heart, the version of him who loved without hesitation may be gone forever. That thought breaks something inside you because you realize how precious that version was and how blindly you walked past it. Yet within this fear lies a powerful opportunity, a chance to transform alongside him instead of behind him. Because the truth is, you cannot ask a man to return to who he was before you hurt him, but you can become someone who understands the value of the new man he is becoming. You can rise into the kind of emotional clarity that matches his. You can build your own strength instead of relying on his. You can grow in ways that earn respect rather than demand comfort. And if you choose to grow, truly grow, something shifts. The fear no longer becomes a sentence, it becomes a catalyst. A force pushing you toward becoming the kind of person who doesn't just admire a good man, but knows how to cherish one. A person who understands that love isn't guaranteed, trust isn't unlimited, and a good man is not replaceable. Because once he changes, the only question that remains is whether you will change too. Every moment you choose growth over comfort, something in you rises that you can't fully see yet, but you can feel it. It's the quiet shift when the mind stops negotiating with weakness and starts aligning with the future you keep imagining. That version of you isn't waiting for circumstances to get easier or for motivation to arrive perfectly timed. It's built from the discipline you practice when no one is watching, from the courage you show when your heart is tired, and from the honesty you bring into the darkest corners of your own excuses. When you decide that your life deserves more than the bare minimum, you stop letting temporary feelings sabotage permanent transformation. There is a strength inside you that's been buried under years of self-doubt, comparison, and silence. But every time you choose to rise, even a little, you uncover another layer of it. You may not notice the difference immediately, but your spirit does. It knows when you choose truth over denial, effort over avoidance, action over hesitation. And each of these choices becomes another stone in the foundation of the person you're becoming. Transformation isn't a loud event. It's a quiet rebellion against the version of you that settled, tolerated, accepted less, and believed the lies that said you weren't capable of more. You've already felt glimpses of your own power, the moments where you surprised yourself, where you kept going when everything in you wanted to stop, where you spoke up when your voice shook, where you chose healing even though staying broken felt easier. Those weren't accidents. Those were signs of the real you emerging, the version untouched by fear, the version unafraid of effort, the version that refuses to let life pass while waiting for permission to begin. That part of you deserves to lead now. It deserves space, commitment, and loyalty from you. There's a quiet point where the mind shifts from hoping to having intention, where you stop asking for change and start choosing it. That is where your life begins to move differently. The world doesn't suddenly open for you. You open for the world. You open for growth, for discipline, for opportunity, for the discomfort that shapes you into something stronger than your past. When you allow yourself to embrace the struggle instead of resisting it, the struggle becomes the very force that strengthens you. You don't need perfection to rise. You need honesty. You need to admit where you are, acknowledge what you've been avoiding, and then choose one step forward. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Every powerful life begins with a decision that no longer allows the old patterns to run the show. And once you make that decision with sincerity, the universe responds. Not with shortcuts, but with clarity. Not with guarantees, but with possibilities. Not with comfort, but with the exact challenges that are designed to grow you into the person capable of living the life you want. You are not here to stay stuck in the version of yourself shaped by doubt or disappointment. You are here to outgrow it, to rise above it, to carve a new pattern so consistently that one day you look back and realize you became the person you once feared you could never be. That shift begins now, with the strength you choose in this moment, with the courage you show in the next, and with the unshakable belief that you are meant for more than the life you were settling for. There comes a moment when you realize that every hesitation you've carried was only a shadow of the strength you already possess. The fears that once felt immovable begin to shrink the moment you confront them with truth instead of avoidance. You start to see that the barriers holding you back were never stronger than your willingness to break through them. They were only strengthened by the attention you gave them, the belief you fed them, and the power you handed away without noticing. But the instant you reclaim that power, even quietly, everything begins to shift in your favor. Your mind learns to stop glorifying the limitations you inherited from past pain. It begins to understand that your old wounds do not get to dictate the direction of your future. You are allowed to outgrow what once hurt you. You are allowed to rise higher than the environment that shaped your early fears. You are allowed to choose a new identity built from intention rather than survival. And each time you choose that identity, your inner strength expands, your awareness sharpens, and the world around you responds with opportunities that align with your new level of self-respect. You start to feel the weight of your potential in a way that's impossible to ignore, not as pressure, but as truth, as a reminder that the fire inside you is real, that the hunger you feel for a better life isn't random, that the quiet stirring in your spirit is evidence of a destiny calling you forward. That call never disappears. It only gets louder the more you try to silence it. And the moment you stop running from it, you realize it was never asking you to be perfect, only present, committed, and willing to grow. You begin to understand that your future isn't built on massive leaps, but on consistent alignment. On the days you don't feel motivated, but still show up. On the moments when you feel overwhelmed, but take one more step. On the nights you feel lost, yet refuse to return to old habits. These are the decisions that create momentum. These are the choices that separate those who talk about change from those who embody it. And with every aligned action, you strengthen the invisible bridge between who you are and who you're becoming. There is a different kind of peace that arrives when you finally decide to trust yourself. Not the version shaped by pressure, expectations, or the need for validation, but the version built from your deepest truth. When you allow that truth to guide you, you stop chasing things that were never meant for you and start attracting everything that aligns with your growth. Your energy changes, your focus sharpens, your standards rise, and the world responds to the new frequency you're operating at. This is the turning point where you stop being defined by what happened and start being defined by what you choose. You choose discipline over distraction. You choose healing over numbing. You choose truth over denial. You choose action over excuses. And every time you make that choice, your life bends in the direction of your courage. The path becomes clearer, Not because it suddenly gets easier, but because you finally believe you deserve to walk it. What you're stepping into now is more than progress. It's a rebirth, a shedding of the smallness you once settled for, a rising into the strength you always carried but never fully claimed. And as you continue forward, you'll realize that the power you were searching for was never outside of you. It was waiting for you to trust it, activate it, and become the person who refuses to live a life that doesn't match the greatness within.